So, like I said, I have spent the last 30 days dry aging this bone-in ribeye. There are different ways you can dry age. Dry aging basically means you are letting the meat sit out at a particular temperature and with lots of air circulation and just letting it dry out, quite literally dry out. A lot of things happen. A lot of people think that it'll actually spoil. That's not the case if you keep it at the proper temperature, which is usually about refrigerator temperature, 37 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see that what actually will happen is this bark kind of stuff will form around it. It should not smell other than of meat. Yep, no rotting smell, no nothing. Like I said, there might be some really dry spots, some really funny looking spots, but that's fine because that's just the outside. What we do is the inside will actually it will have reduced by, depending on how long, anywhere from 10% water weight it will lose, or even more depending on how long. There are some places, some really fancy restaurants, that they actually dry age their whole primal cuts for a year or more, which it will develop a lot of funky flavors. That's another reason to dry age, is not just to increase the meaty flavor of your meat, specifically beef, but also to create like lots of mushroomy, umami, funky flavors that meat will naturally get. When you dry age, you're also tenderizing using a very slow process. Enzymes get in there, they break down the meat, the water evaporates from the meat fibers itself, it shrinks in size, thus whatever's left will be concentrated, the flavors are more concentrated. So I bought this in Yakima, where I grew up, at a place called Ray's Wholesale Meat. They're a great local company. They get their beef from Washington beef, and so this is not prime, it is choice, which is the next level down as far as the grading goes. I would love to get my hands on some prime, or even, I don't know if it'd be a good idea to dry age like a Wagyu or anything. I think the fat content in that it would just be a waste of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can trim this first of all of this outer layer, because you don't want this. This outer layer it's kind of funky. It's a little bit too funky for most people's palates, but you can save it. If you have puppies, you give them to your dogs. You can grind it up and mix it in with hamburger meat. It really adds a depth of flavor. You can put it into stock. You make stock with it. All kinds of stuff. You can fry it up, like this fat right here. You can deep fry it and make basically like beef fat chicharron or crackling. So use whatever knife you have, whatever knives you have. I have a boning knife that it's a super flexible knife. You kind of get in there, just kind of wiggle it around. Pull some of this stuff off. Be very careful not to get your fingers in there, because that is very bad. I have gloved up because I just don't want my hands smelling like funky meat. So I'm going to go on this side first. And you do want to make shallow cuts, because you also want to preserve all that beautiful meat that you have aged. You want as little to go to waste as possible. Again, just small, shallow cuts, making sure to keep any appendages or anything out of the way. I love the process of mise en place, which is basically doing your prep work, cutting your vegetables, your herbs, your whatever it may be, basically prepping everything out, putting them onto containers, and arranging them in a very organized, orderly fashion. So that top layer is gone, and this is what I took off. I tried to take as little as possible off. That's that. So now I'm going to do some of these side pieces. So I did talk about how you do want to use, whatever knife you have, but you do definitely want nice sharp knives. Nothing's worse in a kitchen than a dull knife, other than a dull cook. Now, I'm going to do a little cross section here just so you can see. Can you see that? This beautiful meat here. Now, fresh meat will be much, much, much redder, like bright blood red. Because it's been drying, this meat is now much drier. You can feel and see it's drier. But you can also see the color difference. The color difference, it's a deeper red. And that's what you get with a dry aged meat. Okay, let's flip it to the bone side. This is gonna be fun. So some people ask me, why do I bother dry aging? Well, the flavor, to be honest with you. The flavor is phenomenal for dry aged meats over fresh meat. And if you have the time for it. So I dry aged a similar one, but it was not bone in. Gosh, when did I do it? Maybe about 3-4 months ago. And that's already been portioned and is in my freezer. But I may be halfway through eating it, so I need another one. I need to replenish the supply. So if you have the space and you have the forethought to think, okay, I always want some dry aged meat in my freezer at all times, what you do is you just plan it out. You say, I have 10 steaks in there that are dry aged, and we are going to vacuum seal them so that they will last up to a year in the vacuum sealer. If you plan it out, you can then always make sure that you have a supply at all times, sorry. I think we're good about trimming all of these pieces off. I'm just gonna flip my board. That's a little trick. If one side of your board is dirty, you flip it over, you have a whole brand new side. Now, here comes the moment of truth. How I'm going to portion these. How I'm going to cut through them. Where is the joint that I can cut through easily? Let's pray. Whew, that is a very thick steak. It's a good 2.5 inches. Whew, we got it. Oh, wow. Wow. This is my piece of steak that I just cut. Bone in, 30-day dry aged ribeye. Let's measure this. Tip to end, 9 inches. 4 inches. I lied, 1.5 inches. It's only 1.5 inches thick. So in restaurants, you really won't find dry aged meat over a week or two at the most at a market. But in a restaurant, dry aged meats cost a lot of money because of the time it takes, as well as look at how much I took off of it. This is quite a bit of meat. 30.82 ounces, which is 1 pound. It's almost 2 pounds of trim. 1 pound, 14 ounces. That's how much I took off. That in itself is easily 2 steaks in a restaurant. So I removed 2 steaks worth of meat off the outside of my dry aged ribeye. All right, second cut, here we go. Again, let's pray that I'm finding the right spot to cut. And these are crazy big. My husband's gonna be both really happy and also maybe a little afraid of the size of these. I mean, let's just I can smell the steak. It's crazy. It's funky, but in a like the cheese funky way, not in a well, he needs to be thrown out kind of way. But look at that compared to my head, and I think I'm a relatively average sized person. Look at that compared to my head. How crazy is that? Wow. So I have already prepared all my vacuum sealed bags. I actually prepared too many, and like I said, I label it 30-day dry aged bone-in ribeye with today's date. And there's another space that I'm going to put the weight of each steak because I want to know how much it is before I pull it out of the freezer if it's something that we should even be attempting. The way you should put them into bags, you should invert the opening of the bag so that that part does not get dirty. And by dirty, I mean it doesn't get meat slime or it doesn't get wet, because if it does, the vacuum sealer will have more trouble being able to create that seal. So even if you don't ever want to do this on your own, which is totally understandable, I would recommend finding a good butcher that you can trust, that you can have a conversation with, that you can ask him or her, or they. You can ask them what they like, what's good that day, what are they bringing home to eat. Same with the fishmonger. Same with vegetable and fruit people, you know. The people who grow and raise and procure and sell our food are very important, and they know what's good.